about this next mindset shift, and that is simple training works. Can you just give us a little bit of a taste of what that means?
Sure. Yeah. Simple training, I think we have to define it before we maybe talk about what is the mindset shift. What do we mean when we talk about simple? And I think so often we overcomplicate almost anything that we're trying to do. We want to make things so complicated, and we somehow feel like if we make our training more complex, it's more sophisticated or it is more effective. And yet, what we've seen all around the world, I think DMM practitioners and fruitful people all around the world would say the simpler it can be, the better, because it's reproducible and it can be passed on by anybody. And so just to say, whatever training you're doing, I was working recently with a pastor in California, and he was developing a DMM training for his church. And we just went through and we just said, how can we simplify every single point? Okay, you've got 5 paragraphs here. How can you make it one? How can you
Hmm.
simplify and clarify and just keep it really to something that can be easily absorbed and easily reproduced by anybody? So here's the mindset shift. The old mindset is that church planners and disciple makers need years of seminary and other training to be successful and fruitful. That lots of training equals lots of fruit, right?
Hmm.
And what we've found to be true, and the mindset we need to embrace, is that on the job or just in time training are simple Jesus style means of training disciple makers and leaders. And really, Jesus is our model. His parables were so simple and yet so profound. He told stories. He didn't, hand out long PhD theses. He walked with people. He talked with people. He told stories that anybody could pick up and begin to understand and pass on to others. And so, really, he's our model. How did Jesus make and multiply disciples? He did it in a very, very simple way. It wasn't expensive. It didn't take years of sitting in a classroom. And I don't know, Peter, have you ever seen that little meme that it's about how did Jesus make disciples? And it's got a bunch of people sitting in a classroom. Have you ever
Mm,
seen that?
no,
Yeah.
that's good.
But it's so absurd looking. Here you have the disciples in their, Judean garb, and they're sitting in a classroom and Jesus there. It's like, of course, Jesus didn't do that. How foolish that looks. And
Hmm.
yet, what do? We think, oh, I want to make disciples. What do? I need to have a class. I need to train them for, many, many months. And then I need to give them a certificate, or make them as qualified and educated as I can. And yet, often that just doesn't work. And what we found, as we were training people in India and Nepal, was even a shorter training in Youth with a Mission, which is my organization that I'm with. And in a sense, it's known for practical, fairly simple training. We don't necessarily send people to 4-year degrees.
Hmm.
But even the trainings we had in YWAM that were, say, a 3-month training within a practical phase, we found that they were too complicated.
Mm.
And we would be training people in things that they weren't immediately applying. And then by the time they got to the field to be a church planner or put those things in practice, that was just head knowledge that had gone somewhere, and they went
Hmm.
immediately back to whatever their tradition was rather
Hmm.
than doing things in the way they'd been trained to. And so we just said, you know what, this has to change. This is not working. And so we said, okay, we're just going to do a few days of training, and then we're going to immediately go apply it. And
Mm.
until we see them in the field doing it, we're going to keep training that same topic. We're going to keep working on that same skill. So it was really on the job and immediate application, or as we call it, just in time training.
Hmm.
Just give them what they need for their next step, train them in that, let them start doing it, and then give them the next one as well.
Yeah, no, that's really countercultural to a lot of, I don't know, just even educational systems and paradigms. We got to give them everything. I just was coming to mind. I reflected on this earlier this year, but I was just thinking through, I forget exactly why, I think a friend challenged me maybe, but where have I seen just some fruit in people that I've discipled or trained? And kind of some of the key things that relate to this were um, taking people out with me to go engage the lost and share the gospel. And then usually as part of that was drawing out two things, like a simple paradigm for movement, like how does just knocking on somebody's door or engaging somebody at park relate to seeing like the Great Commission fulfilled? And then the second thing was, here's a simple tool to share the gospel. And like, but it was the most consistent pattern I could see of where I had seen fruit was just very simple tools going to put into practice. And then obviously more potentially happened after that with people, but that was just kind of the marker. It wasn't the marker was not coming to a 3-day training or a 4-day training even. It was just
Right.
getting 25 minutes before you went out and offered to pray for people to start the conversation. So definitely would affirm that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think for many of us who've been doing this for a while, we started from saying, 4-year training with a theological degree. And then we went to, okay, maybe it doesn't take that long. Maybe it just takes 6 months, and
Hmm.
then we trimmed out, okay, well, maybe 1 month could be enough, or a 3-week training. And then it came down to 1 day. And now you're talking about 1 hour, and yeah, get it as just in time as
Hmm.
possible so that people actually can implement and go do it. And yeah, and then repeat the training and continue, which is another mindset shift that we're going to talk about in a minute. That training is a process, and this flows, very easily into that. But just in time means that one bite-sized pieces. And again, our model is Jesus. That's the way that he worked. Um,
Hmm.
yeah. Oh, there's one other example I was going to give. Yeah, just the part about taking people in the field. You mentioned taking people out with you to share door to door, something like that. I think, how did Jesus raise up such amazing apostles? He took them with him on his
Hmm.
trips, and I think there's just such value in that. My husband and I are going to be going to West Africa in the spring, and we'll be visiting some movement leaders there and doing a field visit and some on-site training. Well, I didn't want to go alone. I thought, why should we go alone? Let's look for who is an up and coming coach. I'm a coach, I'm a mentor, trainer of DMMs. Who can I take along and open the door for and train them alongside? So they're watching me, they're training with me, they're interacting on questions that they see right there in the field. And that's going to benefit John, who's going to go with us. He's a new coach that's working with us. It's going to benefit him so much more than going through, a course, even an online course. And I have lots of online courses. I'm big into that, but so much more than an online course for John. What he needs is to go on a field visit with someone like me and observe and learn in the field. And
Hmm.
so that's why we've got to train if we want to multiply leaders and multiply disciples.